Grief can take a tremendous and emotional toll on an individual. In the midst of pain, many people focus on supporting others, keeping everything under control, managing responsibilities, all while trying to survive each day. But caring for ourselves emotionally, mentally, and spiritually is an essential part of the healing process. Today, we're honored to have someone who can tell us even more about that. President and CEO, Annette March-Grier, with us from Roberta's house. Hi, Annette.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us today.
I'm glad to be here.
So excited to have you here. And we want you to share with us a bit about yourself and also about Roberta's house and how Roberta's house actually helps its clients and participants to move forward in the journey of healing after loss. Can you tell us a bit about Roberta's house?
Oh, well, Roberta's house, now approaching 20 years of service in the community, was established to meet an unaddressed need for individuals and families, for children, for adolescents who were dealing with grief and loss, and there were no resources available. It was during a time that we recognized, and when I say we, I'm speaking about the March Funeral Home staff and business that served thousands of families within Baltimore City and Baltimore County that were contending with so much grief and loss, and there were no resources available. So there was as a registered nurse, I saw firsthand the impact of how grief played that toll on our bodies, psychologically, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And that we were suffering as a people with our grief. And there was so much harm as a result of unresolved grief or complicated grief and traumatic grief, or just people not understanding the healing process around their grief. And so Roberta's house was established to address this need and to provide what I want to call sort of psychological first aid to help people learn how to cope and readjust or adapt to life's changes. You know, we weren't taught this kind of natural course in life, because we all deal with adversities and losses throughout life, but as a culture, as human beings, we've learned to sort of just go through life the best way we know how. And so have our parents, and so have our grandparents, and generation. And it hasn't been the healthiest way, but it's the way we've learned to deal with life and life's challenges. And so this, I believe, was an opportunity to, Roberta's house was an opportunity to increase those resources around healthcare, self-care, understanding that grief is all a part of life, as much as we don't like it, as painful as it is, that it's all a part of life, and how do we manage and go through these experiences and have support to do it.
Well, I'm grateful for Roberta's house offering support to thousands of individuals and families, as you said, throughout the state, and continuing to grow its reach. So we're grateful for your vision and the shared vision that you use to move forward. Tell us a bit about yourself and what connected you to this work. What allows you to understand, or what has grown you in developing and understanding grief and healing?
Wow. Honestly, I'm going to say that it began in childhood.
Okay.
As I grew up in a funeral home, watching my parents, who were morticians in Baltimore, and this 3-story row house. I, as a child, would sit at the top of the stairwell and listen to funerals. And watch my mother and listen to an organist who was phenomenal back during those days, Reverend Virginia Wise, and the ministers preach, and I would listen to the mourning and the wailing and the crying, and I would watch my mother comfort these families and hold their hands as they were viewing their loved ones for the first time. And I do believe that there was a seed planted in me, just witnessing and watching and observing. So that's where I think it all originated. And then being in the death care industry, and seeing how we ceremonialize and ritualize our loved ones, and how important that is, and what it does to the healing process, and how important it is that we see our loved ones look beautiful or at peace, and how we celebrate the life of our loved ones. I mean, just being and growing up in this whole environment has sort of led me to where I am today.
Okay.
And now I'm on the other side, in the sense of, you know, what happens in the aftermath of when a death occurs. And how do people get through that? How do we get through that? And it just varies so widely how we get through that. And I think my sensitivity or my passion comes from seeing people suffer and trying to, you know, as a human being, I want to help people to suffer less. To suffer less.
Well said, yeah.
And I think that comes through my nursing background. It comes through just the person that I am, you know, the environment that I grew up around. All of that sort of shapes and molds me as to who I am and why I do what I do. So that has sort of been my passion. That's been my inspiration to do this work more, and it's very rewarding. It really is. As much as it's stressful on my side, because we can't help but to receive what they call secondary trauma as a care provider. You know, that transference.
Yes.
And it does become very taxing, even on myself. There's a reward still in it, as I see other people be able to find hope in the midst of their darkness.
Well, thank you for sharing. That sounds like a very purposeful start and a very weighty task ahead. You mentioned even just carrying this, even with the transference and the secondary trauma, is such a load to carry.
It is.
And what brings us here today is that we want to talk about the self-care portion and the necessity of it. When you hear the phrase self-care, what is it that runs through your mind, and how important is it for you to have those who are grieving to make sure that they remember themselves in there?
When I hear the term self-care, I think about how important it is to prioritize ourselves as much as we prioritize other people. And that's a challenge. Many of us don't know how to care for ourselves because we're always trying to care for someone else. It's a challenge even for me to make that space and make that time, because, you know, others' needs are always seem more demanding.
They seem that way. Yeah.
They seem more demanding, and so maybe that's my perception or how I think of myself. And most people do. They put others before themselves. It's just natural. as they say, those self-care is not selfish. And we have to remind ourselves about that all the time. And I think I'm also a type A personality.
Okay.
And I think so it has to do a lot with your personality type too. That, you know, you, as a child growing up, I've always been project oriented, like having these projects that I've got to complete, you know. And I drive myself crazy, you know, around that. So we self-care also means stepping back for a moment and putting your actions into some priority and deciding what's important, real important, and what's not, and how is it affecting you as well.
Yeah.
And I still have to work on this all the time, all the time. And when it comes to people who are grieving, grief is something that over time and history we've kind of stigmatized and avoided and shunned as an experience that we shouldn't go through.
Talk more
As
to that.
if, okay, so we have learned to suppress feelings that society doesn't like to see. Although historically, you know, if we go back to our ancestry, the mourning process was a very normal, human,
Open.
accepted, open experience. But Western civilization now tells us to hurry up and get over it. Don't show your grief. You know, don't show those tears. Don't express yourself. You know, act like everything is okay and you just move forward or move on. But that's not how we're created as human beings, really. And so along with that, self-care has been taken away or
forgotten practice.
forgotten about.
Yeah.
Forgotten about. And life continues to have its various things that happen along. You know, I might experience a death over here, but I'm also struggling with my job. I'm struggling with raising my children. I might be struggling in my relationships. You know, so all of this just piles on us, and we're expected to be okay.
To put on a brave face.
To put on that mask and act like not everything is fine. So we deny ourselves. And because we deny ourselves of that self-care, our body pays the dues of it.
Talk about the harms that you may see in a person, I want to say a caregiver, who frequently neglects self-care.
The same thing that happens to an individual who's grieving can happen to a caregiver as well. We find ourselves doing tasks or setting priorities before ourselves, and it becomes stressful. We don't reach out, we don't ask for help when we need help because we think we can do it all. At the same time, we feel this sensory overload and this brain overload and of responsibilities and everything else. And what does that do? But that turns on our internal alarm system, which is that fight, flight, or freeze response that our body feels threatened. In a sense, it might be because we can't manage something, or because we can't figure something out, or because we're not taking a break, or because there's no rest in between all of the duties and things. And so then, you know, the blood pressure goes up, you know, the heart palpitates, the cortisol increases. And all of these things, that's our internal alarm that kicks in, but it's not supposed to stay on for long.
Okay.
You know, it's only supposed to be for a certain time period in order for us to figure out, okay, I can handle this. Okay, I can get through this. Okay, I'm going to be okay. Sometimes that never happens. And we have this perception that the situation isn't going to change, or it's not going to get better, or something else piles on top of us, and it just compounds, right? And we stay in this alarm state. So what happens is, you know, the blood sugar increases, which leads to diabetes. The heart increases, and that leads to tachycardia, which is speeding up of the heart, or overworking. You know, the heart's overworking as well, and pumping blood faster than what it should be, so it's working more than it should be over time. Muscle tension, you know, blood clotting increases because our body is in this self-protective mode. It's it's believing that it's at a threat, or there's a threat there. So the body is going to kick in what they call the autonomic nervous system and the parasympathetic system, and it's trying to balance itself. However, it can't balance unless we actively engage in calming ourselves down and believing that we are safe. So that is something we have to intentionally do in order to balance the stress that we're encountering. And sometimes we don't intentionally do that.
Right. What are some tangible ways that the listener right now who may have experienced the symptoms that you just spoke about? I love that you shared that.
Migraine,
nursing perspective. Yeah. The person right now who's listening, who sees and identifies themselves in those symptoms that you've said and are struggling right now and trying to figure out, how can I get out of this, right? What are some tangible ways that this person can now engage in self-care and helping efforts?
First and foremost, I think that it's important that we recognize that joy and happiness and peace is a part of life that we should all experience.
A part of life.
That we should experience. And it's not going to happen to us. We have to make it happen. We have to make it happen intentionally in order to bring this, as we say, woosah, right? We've got to intentionally do that and seek it. So if it means waking up in the morning and having a moment of mindfulness, it could be reading some positive affirmations, or going to bed at night, creating a gratitude list. You know, it kind of rebalances and molds or shapes our way of thinking, you know, other than thinking about, oh, I got this to do, I got that to do, I didn't do this today. You know, the day is going to be full of a lot of tasks that we're trying to accomplish. But we need to sometimes set that time aside to be still. The other thing, that's one tangible thing that we can do. The other one is finding things that bring you joy.
Okay.
Practice some of those things that bring you joy as well. So if it's watching a funny movie instead of a thriller, or some movie that is a, you know, violent movie or something that, you know, maybe a funny movie that's going to make you laugh. Laughter releases those hormones in the body too that, you know, it's called serotonin, that calms us, that makes us feel good, that balances everything out. So watching a funny movie or getting involved, many people, you know, there are dance classes everywhere, line dancing and all kinds of different hand dancing, you know, classes, something that's going to give you that physical activity to exert some of that stress, as well as make you feel good and feel like you're moving and doing things. There are other things like journaling that can bring peace. Especially journaling helps kind of clear the brain and get some of these matters off of the brain that you're constantly thinking about. Other practices might be just taking a walk and enjoying nature.
Yeah, yeah.
Some people get in a car and just drive. You know, they find their quietness there. So seeking intentional spaces to relax. Taking a vacation. Some people have never taken a trip or a vacation. I can't imagine. I can't imagine.
Never.
I mean, even if you can't afford to go far, go visit a friend or just, vacate somewhere. These are, this self-care, if I want to live a long, healthy life, I've got to make a priority for myself.
Yes.
And that's anybody who's going through this. You know, you've got to decide, because I always say this, stress is what takes us all out. The compounding stress of life and life's issues, life's challenges weigh us down. They weigh us down. And I love to interview people who are 100 years old and older, because you want to know what the secret is,
what's
right?
the secret?
What is the secret that has kept them here this long? And I'm talking about those that are 100 years old who are still up and about, moving and taking care of themselves. And you know they've been through some things in life.
In that many years.
Many years. And from what I have learned from the few that I have talked to, has a lot to do with attitude. Has a lot to do with attitude and how they perceive the experiences that they go through in life. And sort of a sense that, you know, nothing was so great that was going to take them down or out, even though they've had problems and deaths throughout their lives and everything else, is that they've had a sense of peace that no matter what was happened, it was not the end of the world.
Wow.
And that's what we struggle with too, because we think sometimes we, as they say, we make a mole into a mountain.
A mountain out of a molehill.
Yes. And we do that, and we have to learn to balance those thoughts. Again, it goes back to our thoughts, our frame of thinking, and how we create the balance in our lives. Cell phones, I believe, has become our worst enemy.
Why do you say that?
Because we have to stay connected. It doesn't allow us to disconnect from everything that's going on now. You know, it just, we're constantly having to communicate, we're constantly having to stay engaged in something, and it's not allowing us to rest.
And that's a sense of alarm too, because it actually sounds off and you immediately attend to it. But we don't do this to our bodies. We don't do this to our thoughts when we're in crises, or when we're in this place after we've lost someone who meant a lot to us, maybe gave us identity or something of that sort. To move on is to try to disengage from that alarm that we're hearing and then move forward. You gave some practical tools that I'm sure that anyone who's listening can actually hear that. A key that I heard you say is that this is continuous. This isn't a one and done.
No.
So once we engage, or once this person, us, engage or re-engage, as you said, you want to get back on the train, I'm going to do it again.
That's
right?
And that's life. We get off the wagon and we get back on the wagon.
Right.
We keep trying.
Yes, and success is on the other side of that.
That's right.
So the push and to ensure that you have the right support beside you would be key and instrumental. What ways do you think a person in this space can engage to support, such as Roberta's house?
Are you referencing like a caregiver who might be needing support for themselves, or how do they find the support from other resources?
So this can be the caregiver. This can be that individual who's trying to move beyond the alarm state and move forward in the grieving process. This could be you and I sitting at this table.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's what comes to mind. Having these conversations, having girl talks, you know, having guy talks.
Yes. Sharing. Yes.
Is a way of really gaining support and insight. I went for New Year's on a little retreat with 5 other couples.
Okay.
And we didn't know each other. We all did not know each other. And it was amazing what transpired amongst us, just being in a group with others and sharing life stories and sharing what we had been through and are still going through. With some of us, it was like the girls got in their huddle and the guys got in their huddle. And one gentleman said, he said, you know, I wasn't trusting this process of coming here, and I'd never done this before, and I didn't know what to expect. He said, but this was amazing. He said, I've never shared so much, you know, with a group of strangers, with people. So it also says that human connection for support is so important.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
It is critical. Because oftentimes we feel so isolated in our own life experiences. But when we start sharing with other people and connecting with other people, we find that no, we're not the only ones going through this. And you know, I may have thought my experience was the worst, but unfortunately, and I'm not trying, I don't want to compare. But you know, if they can make it through what they've gone through and experience these things and has really come out on the other side, then we're all going to be okay. You know, so I say that support by connecting with other people, whether it be your friends, whether it be your family, whether it be strangers. It's a part of healing and receiving that support and helping us to also, it's another part of that self-care. Connection with others.
Connection with others, And it's funny that you even say that, because with self-care, to connect with others can actually help us in that journey. Because we're coming outside of that place where we're probably isolating.
And it's so important to step outside of ourselves.
Well, Annette, this work is deeply emotional, and I can see that you pour yourself into your work. I can see that there are times where the work can become heavy on your back, but when engaging and being intentional about engaging and re-engaging in self-care, it can revive that space. Can you speak to how, when you engage in self-care, your passion is reignited for your work, for life?
Yes. As they say, you cannot give from an empty cup. And, you know, when you take the time out for self, when you pamper yourself, when you make yourself feel good, when you know, seek that joy, when you find that peace, when you take that trip, when you have a prayer, when you meditate, you know, you are refueling or refilling that cup. And you have to have that if you're, if you're going to constantly pour out, you got to have something to fill it back up. So it's essential. And oftentimes, and I want to relate this to grief a little bit. I mean, you know, as someone who's going through their grief experience, they begin to feel joy, and then they begin to feel guilty about feeling joy.
Yes. Yes.
It's like they've been praying to feel life again, to want to live, but then once they start experiencing it, then there's a sense of guilt. Shame on us. You know, but it's a natural human experience. I mean, that we all kind of feel guilty about feeling happy when we think or believe we should feel sad.
Yeah. What society
And where
tells
does
us
that come from? You know? So I think that we have to evaluate what we believe and how we think. And not punish ourselves, because sometimes we punish ourselves because we hurt, because someone has died. We feel like we don't deserve to have happiness because they've died. These are misbeliefs and false beliefs. Yeah. Because we are sad, because we are grieving their loss. But again, as I always say that we determine how long we stay there. Nobody determines that but us. And it is okay to grieve. It is okay to be sad. It is okay to be angry. It is okay to mourn. But how long do we stay in that space? And nobody should judge this for us. But how long do we stay in this space before we begin to live again? Because we still have a purpose. If we're still here, we still have a purpose to fulfill while we're here. And grieving takes a lot of time away from living fully. But it has a purpose itself, because it shatters us to reinvent us. Does that make sense?
It makes absolute sense.
It shatters us and breaks us down to reinvent us. And that's why I say grief is an opportunity for growth. But we have to believe that, we have to understand it, and we have to acknowledge that grief is an opportunity for growth. And how do we go through it in order to come out with growth on the end? So no pain, no gain.
Yeah. I always repeat what you say. Grief is work. Grief work is work.
It's work.
And it requires you to work.
It's just like a muscle you have to build. You know, in fact, I learned something in one of my readings recently, that there's a gray matter in our brains that helps to equalize and integrate new information and knowledge. The gray matter in our brains is strengthened by such activities as talking about your life experiences, journaling, dancing, arts, things to help. It helps to increase that gray matter and strengthen that gray matter that helps us to equalize and balance our life out. So everything that we do is really connected physically, psychologically, and spiritually. Everything that we do. It's just not to be doing it for no purpose. You know what I mean? There's a reason why we do these things. We don't quite understand it all. We don't always have the knowledge as to why we're doing what we're doing. But it does, in fact, impact us physically as well.
Well, thank you for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge on this topic. As we are concluding this episode, it is extremely important to be intentional.
Intentional, yes.
Intentional, I'm getting that from you. Intentional about self-care and re-engaging to be intentional about apprehending peace, joy, and love. If there are any last words that you want to leave with our listeners today, what would they, not last words, but final words for this episode. What would that be regarding self-care?
Again, I would just like to reiterate that self-care is not selfish.
Mm-hmm.
You are the number one priority if you want to fulfill your purpose here on earth and live wholly and fully. You have to be accountable to self first.
Yeah. Well, you heard it here, and you heard it from Annette March-Grier, our president and CEO of Roberta's House, where the grief work for grief and loss is intentional in helping individuals and families to go forward in their journey after loss. Thank you, Annette, for joining us on today. We look forward to meeting with you in a future episode.
Thank you, Mona.
Thank you. And for our listeners, thank you so much for staying with us for this episode. If you want to stay connected with us, anything in this message that has resonated with you, feel free to follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Until the next time, take good care of yourselves. Be very intentional to take good self-care of yourselves. And we'll see you.
Thank you for joining us for Real Talk with Roberta's House. Roberta's House, based in Baltimore, Maryland, serves individuals and families across the state, walking alongside those who are grieving and advancing grief care as an essential part of public health. This program is supported in part by the Baltimore Mayor's Opioid Restitution Fund, the Maryland Department of Health, and by generous donors like you. For more information or to support our work, please visit robertashouse.org. Real Talk with Roberta's House is executive produced by Dr. Alexander Satori Robinson, with video and sound production by 89 Crowns, and leadership from Annette March-Grier, president and co-founder of Roberta's House. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of our guests and contributors and do not necessarily reflect those of Roberta's House. Thank you for listening and for being part of a community that believes healing is possible.